Welcome to Mysterious Anecdotes. Today we're exploring the interesting history of America's wars. From the birth of the nation with the Revolutionary War to modern conflicts, each war has changed the United States in big ways. Let's dive in and discover the amazing stories and strange facts behind these wars. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more historical content. Our story starts with the Revolutionary War. This is the war where America fought for its independence from Britain. It began in 1775 because the American colonists were angry about British rules, like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act. The famous Boston Tea Party, where colonists threw British tea into the harbor to protest the taxes, was a pivotal moment that fueled the flames of rebellion. Important battles like the Siege of Yorktown in 1781 helped America win the war. This conflict was not just a crucible for American identity, but also a test of unyielding resilience. The signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783 not only marked the end of hostilities, but also acknowledged American independence, altering the geopolitical landscape of the time. Amidst espionage and secrecy, George Washington's spies used invisible ink for confidential communications. The Culper spy ring was so secretive that its existence wasn't confirmed until the 20th century. Additionally, many British forces were actually German mercenaries called Hessians, hired out by their princes to fight for the British crown. Next, we have the American Civil War, a disagreed about slavery between the northern states, the Union, and the southern states, the Confederacy that seceded from the Union. The war started in 1861. The war's primary cause was the contentious issue of slavery. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 was a key turning point by declaring that all slaves in the southern states were free, fundamentally reshaping the nation's legal and cultural landscape. Major battles like Gettysburg in 1863 and the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in 1865 ended the conflict, leading to the abolition of slavery and the preservation of the Union. The war ended in 1865 with Confederate General Robert E. Lee's surrender, which not only ended the conflict, but also led to the abolition of slavery, marking a significant transformation in American society and governance. There were many strange things that occurred during the war. The Minie ball, a type of bullet, caused such horrific injuries that many limbs had to be amputated, contributing to the high number of amputees. Did you know the Confederates had a submarine called the H.L. Hunley? It was the first to sink an enemy ship, but it also sank itself. Both sides used hot air balloons for reconnaissance missions, marking one of the earliest uses of air power in warfare. World War I, also known as the Great War, was a massive conflict that involved many countries. The United States joined the Allies in 1917 after initially trying to stay neutral. But what sparked this enormous war? It all started with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, but the real reasons were much more complicated. There were complex alliances, countries building up their armies, militarism, nations trying to expand their empires, imperialism, and strong pride in their countries, nationalism. When the US entered the war, they fought in some of the grueling battles, like the Meuse-Argonne offensive. This battle involved over 1.2 million American soldiers, and was a crucial part in helping the Allies win the war. But did you know there were some weird and amazing facts about World War I? Here are 3 you might not have heard of. First, communication lines were so unreliable that dogs carried messages. One of the most incredible stories from World War II involves a special bear named Wojtek. Yes, you heard that right, a bear. Wojtek wasn't just any bear, he was an honorary member of the Polish army. Found by soldiers as a cub, Wojtek grew up alongside them and even helped carry ammunition during battles. Can you imagine a bear in the army? But that's not all. We also have the amazing story of Cher Ami, a brave pigeon who served in the U.S. Army Signal Corps. During a fierce battle, Cher Ami flew through enemy fire to deliver a crucial message, saving the lives of nearly 200 trapped soldiers. Talk about a feathered hero. These incredible tales remind us that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, even furry and feathered ones. Second, soldiers faced a painful condition called trench foot. Spending too much time in wet, muddy trenches could cause serious infections. The trenches, notorious for their unsanitary conditions, led to massive rat infestations. The rats that fed on decaying bodies, growing to the size of cats. And third, on Christmas Eve in 1914, something incredible happened. Soldiers from both sides stopped fighting, sang carols, exchanged gifts, and even played soccer together in no man's land. This event was called the Christmas Truce. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. This treaty imposed harsh penalties on Germany and reshaped the map of Europe, setting the stage for future upheavals, including World War II. World War I was a tough and strange time in history, but it showed the power of teamwork and the importance of striving for peace. From the aftermath of World War I to the eruption of World War II, a time of uneasy peace settled over the world. But soon, another global conflict emerged, pitting the Allies, including the United States, against the Axis powers. In 1941, the tranquility shattered when Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor pulled America into the fray. With the stage set for a monumental struggle, American forces embarked on a journey that would span continents and reshape history. Battles like Midway and Normandy became pivotal moments where the tide of war shifted in favor of the Allies. Picture this. At Normandy, Allied troops stormed the beaches, facing fierce resistance but ultimately gaining a foothold that would lead to victory. And when atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, the world witnessed the devastating power of modern warfare. With the surrender of Germany and Japan, the conflict officially ended, but its impact reverberated far beyond the battlefield. The birth of the United Nations signaled a new era of international cooperation, aimed at preventing future cataclysms like this. Now let's delve into some intriguing tidbits about World War II. Ever heard of a ghost army? It sounds like something out of a movie, but it was real. The US deployed inflatable tanks and fake radio signals to deceive German forces, a clever ruse that helped turn the tide of battle. In Operation Paperclip, it wasn't about office supplies. After the war, the US secretly recruited over 1,600 German scientists under Operation Paperclip. One of them was German scientist Wernher von Braun, who helped America with space and rocket projects during the Cold War. But amidst the chaos of war, let's not forget our four-legged heroes, the war dogs. These brave dogs were trained to detect mines, carry messages, and serve as guard dogs. They played a huge role in helping the military. World War II was a time of great struggle and incredible heroism. It changed the world forever and taught us the importance of peace and cooperation. After World War II ended in 1945, peace didn't last long. Just 5 years later, a new conflict began in Korea. Let's dive into the Korean War, which started in 1950. The Korean War began when North Korea, backed by China and the Soviet Union, invaded South Korea. The United States joined the fight to help South Korea under the United Nations banner. There were many important battles during the Korean War. One of the most famous was the Battle of Incheon, where a daring amphibious landing helped turn the tide in favor of the United Nations forces. The war was incredibly tough, especially at the Chosan Reservoir. It was so cold that soldiers used the frozen bodies of their fallen friends as protection from enemy fire. The harsh winter conditions made everything even more difficult. Here's a bizarre fact. The US offered $100,000 to any North Korean pilot who would defect with a MiG-15 fighter jet. It took 2 years, but finally a pilot accepted the offer and flew to freedom. Communication during the war wasn't always perfect. There were times when US forces accidentally bombed their own positions, causing many casualties. It shows just how chaotic war can be. The Korean War ended in 1953, but it didn't bring true peace. North and South Korea are still technically at war today, separated by a heavily fortified border known as the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. The Korean War was a difficult and complex conflict with many brave and strange moments. After the Korean War ended in 1953, the world saw a brief period of peace. But just a few years later, in 1955, another conflict erupted in Vietnam. The Vietnam War was a long and difficult struggle between communist North Vietnam and non-communist South Vietnam. The United States joined in to help the South, hoping to stop the spread of communism. American soldiers were sent to Vietnam to support the South Vietnamese army. They faced many challenges, including the dense jungles and the guerrilla tactics used by the Viet Cong, the communist fighters. One of the biggest events of the war was the Tet Offensive in 1968. The Viet Cong launched surprise attacks on major cities and military bases all over South Vietnam. It shocked the world and showed that the war was far from over. There were dark moments too, like the My Lai massacre. In 1968, American soldiers killed hundreds of innocent Vietnamese villagers. This tragic event made many people question the war and why it was being fought. Some of the bravest soldiers were called tunnel rats. They crawled through the Viet Cong's network of underground tunnels, which were full of traps and dangers. It was a scary and important job to find and destroy these hidden passages. The US also used a chemical called Agent Orange to destroy the thick jungle that gave cover to the enemy, but it caused serious health problems and birth defects for many people, even long after the war ended. The war finally ended in 1975 when North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. This event marked the unification of Vietnam under communist rule, bringing an end to years of fighting. The Vietnam War left a lasting impact on everyone involved. It was a time of great courage and hardship. Many soldiers and civilians were affected, and their stories are remembered today. After the Vietnam War ended in 1975, the world experienced a relatively peaceful period for about 15 years. But in 1990, a new conflict arose in the Middle East. The Gulf War, also known as Operation Desert Storm, began when Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded the small country of Kuwait in 1990. This invasion shocked the world. The United States, along with many other countries, formed a coalition to help Kuwait. They wanted to push the Iraqi forces out and restore peace. This coalition included soldiers, ships, and planes from many different nations. The war started with a massive air campaign. Coalition forces launched thousands of airstrikes on Iraqi targets. This was to weaken Iraq's military and make it easier to drive them out of Kuwait. After the air campaign, the ground assault began. Coalition troops, tanks, and vehicles moved swiftly across the desert. They faced some resistance but were able to push the Iraqi forces back. During the war, Iraq launched Scud missiles at coalition forces and Israel. This caused widespread panic. But the coalition had Patriot missiles that could intercept and destroy the Scuds, helping to defend against these attacks. One of the most dramatic moments was when retreating Iraqi soldiers set fire to Kuwaiti oil wells. This caused massive environmental damage and filled the skies with thick, black smoke. It was a terrible sight. Another significant event was the attack on a retreating Iraqi convoy on Highway 80. Coalition forces targeted the convoy, leaving a scene of destruction that became known as the Highway of Death. It showed the intense power of the coalition's military might. The Gulf War ended quickly in 1991 with a ceasefire. Kuwait was free again, but Saddam Hussein remained in power in Iraq. The war had shown the strength of international cooperation, but also left lasting impacts on the region. The Gulf War was a brief but intense conflict that changed the course of history in the Middle East. It demonstrated the power of unity and the importance of standing up against aggression. After the Gulf War ended in 1991, the world saw nearly a decade of relative peace. But in 2001, a new conflict began that would last for many years. The Afghanistan War started after the tragic events of September 11, 2001. The 9/11 attacks shocked the world and led the United States to take action. The US wanted to destroy Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group behind the attacks, and remove the Taliban from power in Afghanistan. This was a huge mission, and many other countries joined in to help. Afghanistan is a country with very tough terrain. The mountains made fighting very difficult, with soldiers having to battle at high altitudes. It was a challenging environment for everyone involved. One of the key battles was the Battle of Tora Bora in 2001. US forces tried to capture Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, who was hiding in the mountains. It was a fierce battle, but bin Laden managed to escape. After many years of searching, Osama bin Laden was finally found and killed by US Navy SEALs in Pakistan in 2011. This was a significant moment in the war against terrorism. The goal of the war was not only to fight terrorists but also to help build a stable Afghan government. This has been a long and difficult process, with ongoing conflict making it hard to achieve peace. Here's something unusual. Afghan warlords and Taliban fighters sometimes wore blue jeans under their traditional clothing. They believed the jeans would protect them from injury during battle. Another challenge in Afghanistan is the production of opium. Despite efforts to stop it, Afghanistan remains the world's largest producer of opium, which helps fund insurgent groups. The Afghanistan war has been a long and tough journey for everyone involved. It's a story of bravery, struggle, and the ongoing fight for peace. After the Afghanistan war, the world hoped for peace. But soon, another conflict began in a country far away. The Iraq War started in 2003 when the United States and its allies launched a massive invasion to topple Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq. The goal was to remove him from power and eliminate weapons of mass destruction. This was a challenging and dangerous mission, with key battles like the Battle of Fallujah, where U.S. forces faced fierce resistance from insurgents, but they were determined to succeed. In 2003, Saddam Hussein, the former dictator of Iraq, was captured by U.S. forces. This was a significant moment in the war, but it didn't bring an end to the conflict. The Iraq War officially ended in 2011, but the country continued to face instability and violence. The aftermath of the war left Iraq struggling to rebuild and find peace. During the war, the U.S. military issued a deck of playing cards featuring the most wanted Iraqi officials. Saddam Hussein was the ace of spades, and capturing him was a top priority. The heavily fortified Green Zone in Baghdad became a symbol of the U.S. presence in Iraq. It was a frequent target for attacks and a reminder of the ongoing conflict. Massive sandstorms known as shamals often swept through Iraq, disrupting military operations and creating hazardous conditions for troops. The Iraq War may be over, but its impact is still felt today. It was another challenge they had to overcome. The Iraq War was a long and difficult chapter in history. It's a story of courage, sacrifice, and the ongoing quest for peace. America's wars have changed its history, showing bravery, sadness, new ideas, and sometimes strange things. From the Revolutionary War to fighting in Afghanistan, these battles shaped America's role in the world and what it stands for. Each war tells a story of people's strength, resilience, and the hard parts of having power. Thinking about these times in history helps us understand how governments work, how wars hurt people, and how we try to make peace. Each war has its own story and teaches us about how wars affect the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through America's wars. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more captivating historical content. Until next time, stay curious.